Good morning, students. Today I am there with the new topic, that is new religious traditions. Like yesterday, we have talked about the Buddhism and we have discussed it in a wider scale. So now let's see that how in this Buddhism only, this Buddhism was the new two ideas developed in Buddhism. The new one was called Mahayana Buddhism and the older one was called Hinayana. So this Buddhism also, then the followers of Buddhism divided into two parts. But the first century there was Buddhist ideas and practices which were practiced in early Buddhist teachings has given more importance to the self efforts. Self efforts means the efforts of the people themselves, the followers efforts, how they were doing efforts to achieve nibbana. Nibbana means a liberation from these worldly powers and have a self control. Besides, the Buddha was regarded as a human being. He was regarded as a human being who attained enlightenment, because Buddha also attained and got his enlightenment, that is the real knowledge and nirvana, through his own efforts. Matlab, what efforts he did, just because of that only he got enlightenment. So gradually the idea of this self efforts turn into a savior. Savior means a person to whom you will worship so that God will save you from these worldly powers. If means in the next world, then you will get a good birth. So it was believed that he was only the one who could ensure salvation. Salvation means ki if you will worship that God, so then that God is going to give you salvation, means moksha. Moksha means when you will be free from the circle of life and death. Simultaneously, the concept of bodhisattvas also developed, means those who were worshipping this Buddha, they were called bodhisattvas, and this also started developing, and these bodhisattvas were perceived as deeply compassionate beings who accumulated merits through their efforts. And it was discussed that these bodhisattvas are those people, those who have attained everything through their efforts, but they haven't used this for attaining any nibbana. Like they haven't attained this, they haven't done this self efforts to attain the nibbana, but they have attained this nibbana to help the people, to help the other people. So this was called the new tradition of Buddhism, that is Mahayana. So this new way of thinking was called Mahayana, and literally it is also called great vehicle. So those who adopted these beliefs, they described the older one tradition as Hinayana, which was called lesser vehicle. So when we talk about these two sects of Buddhism, that is Hinayana and Mahayana, so we will see that how this tradition has led to the growth of the Puranic Hinduism. So how we were talking about ki there was change in the ideas of the Buddhism from Hinayana to Mahayana, same way only there were also some changes observed in the Puranic Hinduism also. Like if we will see that the Hinduism, when we consider the part of Hinduism, because in Hinduism also there was at that time two sects were there. One was the Vaishnavism and second one was Shaivism. So Vaishnavism means the form of Hinduism in which Vishnu was worshipped. Lord Vishnu, you know everyone. So Lord Vishnu was worshipped as the principal deity, and Shaivism is a tradition in which Shiva was regarded as the chief god, and in which there was growing emphasis on the worship of a chosen deity. And that time the people were choosing their god themselves ki to whom they wanted to worship. In such worship, the bond between the devotee and the god, devotee means bhakt and god means bhagwan, was seen in one of the love between the devotion and bhakti. So this love between the bhakt and bhagwan, that was called as bhakti. In the case of Vaishnavism culture, it developed around the various avatars. You know that Vishnu has taken various avatars. You know that Krishna is also one of the incarnation of Vishnu only. Bhagwan Ram, that is also one of the incarnation of Bhagwan Vishnu, who has taken birth on, had taken birth on the earth to save people from some disaster. So 10 avatars were recognized within the tradition, and these were forms that the deity was believed to have. Why these all forms have been taken by Vishnu, Lord Vishnu, on the earth? Just because they wanted to, whenever there was any threat to the earth or threat to the world due to some disorder and destruction, because of that only, or maybe because of any evil forces, so that time only Lord Vishnu had taken birth on this earth. And it is likely that different avatars were popular in different parts of the country. We can't say that ki like Lord Krishna, he born in Dwarka, when we talk about that, fine. So Lord Rama, he born in Ayodhya. So we can't say that ki this Vishnu had taken avatars only or taken birth only at one place. So recognizes each of these local deities as a form of Vishnu was one way of treating a more unified religious tradition. So some of these forms were represented in sculptures also. If you will see the sculptures, not only that Buddhist sculptures may you are able to see just only the sculptures of Buddha, but also if you will see that ki there were also sculptures in Hinduism also. Shiva, for example, was symbolizing by linga. Shivling, you know that? Ki if we see the Shivling, we identify Shivling with Lord Shiva. So, although he was occasionally represented in the human form, you know that whenever we are talking about Lord Shiva, so we always symbolizes Shiva with Shivling. So, these the weapons or maybe the objects which they were these god and goddesses were using at that time, they were taken as the symbol for those god and goddesses. So when we talk about this Puranic Hinduism, so when we see about this Hinduism, so we familiar with the stories behind them also, ki why they were symbolizes with those weapons or the objects which were they were using. So why they were identified with that, many of which were contented in the Puranas. Contented means which are contained, sorry, which are contained in Puranas. So these all things which we are now familiar, they all are contained in Puranas, compiled by the Brahmanas. Fine. So they contained much that has been composed and been circulated for centuries, including stories about god and goddesses. When we read about those stories and listen about these stories, so generally we come across these weapons and these symbols which were used for these gods and goddesses. So much of what is contained in the Puranas evolved through interaction among the people. So how we come to know about that ki these all things have been Puranas? Because when we interact with the different types of people like priests, merchants, ordinary men and women, when they were traveling from one place to another place, they were sharing their ideas and beliefs, and through that sharing only the people come to know about that ki like how the different traditions were followed in the different parts of the country. So like Lord Vasudev Krishna was an important Lord in Mathura region over centuries, and his worship spread to other parts of the country as well. We cannot say that Lord Krishna is only popular in Mathura, but he is also worshipped in different parts of the country by different names. So then slowly the tradition of building temples also started. So around the time that stupa at the sites such as Sanchi were acquiring their present form, at the same time only the temples to house of images of these gods and goddesses, which was called the house of these god and goddesses, were also started being constructed. So the early temple was a small square room called Garbha Griha. Garbhagriha. Garbhagriha was, it's a Sanskrit word. Garbhagriha means a single doorway for the in worshipper to enter and offer worship to the image, and gradually a tall structure and then known as, that is called Shikhar. Shikhar means top. You know that the temple, it's first it was square, but at the top there was शिखर. शिखर कहते थे tall, we can say that उसका ऊपर का जो होता है ना बेटे part of that temple, जो शिखर means उसका top part on the roof, that was built over the central of the shrine. Shrine means, I told you earlier also bete, a place which belonged to some religious person. So temple walls were often decorated with the sculptures. Temple walls were also decorated with the different. Later temples became far more elaborate slowly, because first of all it was just only the one single room, and on that the top was the shikhar, and slowly the structure of these temples started getting elaborate. And one of the unique feature of the early temples was that ki some of these were hollowed out of huge rocks, ki some of them have been hollowed, मतलब रॉक्स में खोद कर उनको बनाया गया एज एन आर्टिफिशियल केव्स. इट लुक्स लाइक आर्टिफिशियल केव्स, एंड ट्रेडिशन ऑफ बिल्डिंग आर्टिफिशियल केव्स वाज एन old one. So ये जो tradition था ना building of artificial caves, that was the old one. And some of the earlier figures, if you will see the figure 4.27, so you will see that there was some change in the structure of the temples. So these temples of these were constructed which were in the 3rd century BCE on the orders of Ashoka for the remembrance who belonged to Ajivika sect. Ajivika sect who renounces. Ashoka for renouncers. Renouncers mean those people who leave this world. So tradition evolved through various stages. this temple building was also went through the different stages till the 8th century in the carving out of an entire temple, that of Kailashnath temple of Lord Shiva. Okay, and slowly slowly they started, we can say that, um, to dedicate, yes, a dedicate is the correct word, ki slowly slowly they started dedicating these temples to particular god or goddesses. So now, can we see everything through these sculptures, and can we understand each and everything through these sculptures? So that is also one of the mystery, ki how we can understand all these things by reading this, studying about these sculptures only. So now we had a glimpse of the rich visual traditions that existed in the past, expressed in the bricks and stone architecture. Sculptures हमने पढ़े, paintings we have also seen. So we have also seen that much has been destroyed, कि काफ़ी सारे इनमें से जो structures sculptures हैं that has been destroyed also, like Amravati Stupa, a number of temples of that period are also now they are, their remains are very less, remains are left and has been preserved also many times by the many rulers. So this also conveys us a sense of vision of the artist. When we see all these buildings, all these temples and stupas, we come to know that what was the what these artists, sculptures, those who have constructed it, those who have masons, those who have built it, an architect, what they mean to say by constructing these all structures. So this we wanted to just study by grappling with the unfamiliar. This is the next key, which things are familiar that we all know. Now let's see that key, it will be useful to recall that when 19th century European scholars first saw some of the sculptures of god and goddesses, they could not understand. First of all, now these European people, when they started taking interest into the images of these god and goddesses, first of all they were very confused by seeing these, they were heavily decorated, these sculptures with the heavy jewelry with these god and goddesses, and then like snakes were all around those god and goddesses. So they were get very confused and they were not able to understand ki why these pictures were drawn like, why these sculptures are drawn like this. And sometimes they were horrified also by seeing all these images of these god and goddesses with the multiple arms. You know that some god and goddesses have multiple arms, like Durga, Mata Durga, god goddess Durga, she is having number of arms. So when they were seeing all these things, they get scared of all these things, and these early scholars tried to make sense of what appeared to be strange images by comparing them with the sculptures with which they were familiar. Because you know that they were familiar with their tradition of the sculptures, ki what was their artistic work in their countries, and that is which was belonging to or which is related to the ancient Greece. And when they were comparing that ancient Greece one with the Indian tradition, Indian architecture, so they were not able to familiarize both them, they are not able to compare both. And while they often found early Indian sculptures inferior, and what they were saying that कि जो हमारे इंडियन एंशियंट स्कल्पचर्स आर्ट एंड आर्टिस्टिक वर्क वॉज देयर, दे वर थिंकिंग दैट कि दैट इज़ inferior than the Greek artist, and they were very excited when they discover images of Buddha and Bodhisattvas. Why? Because they were looks like exactly just like the Greek sculptures, Greek models. So they took more interest into the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, these all models, and there were more often than not found in the northwest, in cities such as Takshila, Peshawar, where Indo-Greek rulers were ruled. Definitely, bete see, when we have seen that different rulers were ruling in different times. So whenever they were ruling, whichever buildings, whichever sculptures, structures they built, in that we can see the influence of their architecture. So as in these parts where these stupas and all these Buddha structures were built, at those parts Indo-Greek rulers has ruled. So they have established their kingdoms in the 6th century. So that is why these images were very close to the Greek structure. So these scholars were familiar with, they were considered to be the best examples of the early Indian arts. So the next topic now, and we will see that if text and images do not match, अगर ये text और images एक दूसरे से match नहीं करती हैं, then how we can construct history of that period. So that was the next problem. So we have seen that the art historians often draw upon textual traditions to understand. They were also relating those images with the text which were written on those beliefs and ideas which were written in those texts. They were also drawing attention on that and trying to understand the meaning of those sculptures by relating them to any of the text, maybe to the Buddhism, maybe to the Hinduism. So while this is certainly a far more efficacious strategy than comparing Indian images with the Greek statues, we can see that this is the best method. In spite of we can compare the Indian images with the Greek statues, so that was not the right way to compare it. We can relate these images with the text, whatever is written in those texts, also in those religious books also. So it is not always easy to use. One of the most intriguing examples of this is the famous sculpture along a huge rock surface in Mahabalipuram, that is in Tamil Nadu. A great image is there. So vivid depiction of a story. Which story is it? So art historians, this is certainly a far more effective strategy than comparing. So let's see that which was the story which is related with this. Some feel that this statue of Mahabalipuram, it shows the descent of the river Ganga from heaven. Descent means the successors, those who have come on this earth, and those who were the successors of Lord, river Ganga. So they were saying that they have come from heaven with uh, river Ganga. So this natural cleft through the center, the rock surface might represent the river. It is also showing the river also, and the story itself is narrated in the Puranas and epics. And by relating this Mahabalipuram statue with the stories which is given in the Puranas, then very easily the historians are able to understand what that statue wanted to convey, and what was the idea of the scholars or the idea of the sculptures to convey, what they wanted to convey through that. So same way only when we represent this story from the Mahabharata and Arjun doing penance on the river bank, it all in order to acquire arms. And why Mahabharata mein Arjuna was doing penance matlab tapasya karna, and why they were doing this ticked penance on the river banks? To get some arms, so that he can get victory in the war against Kauravas. So student, this was all about this chapter, thinkers, ki how these thinkers through their, by reading the beliefs and by reading the buildings, how they constructed history around it. So tomorrow I will come with the next topic. So till then bete, goodbye.